Who else? Don't want any kids. That's surprising. I think that I would have thought it'd be more people that didn't want kids for your generation. Who would prefer to have them later in life rather than earlier? What do you think?
Um,
30s
yeah,
or 40s?
30s, because I'd rather be like financially stable, but right now, staying alone is not, is not the smartest idea, and I do also want to travel a lot more as well.
You want to get everything out the way and then.
Yes, because I'm not traveling, if they can't walk or talk or take care of themselves, they're not traveling with me.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be that person on the airplane with a crying child,
Baby.
yeah.
8 hours. How about you? What are you thinking, age range? Okay.
Well, cause by the time I'm like 30, I'm gonna be done with school, so I kinda wanna get school out of the way first.
Okay.
And this economy,
Yeah, but who knows what the future looks like, right?
I'm not
It
even worried
works.
about that.
Who knows? Anything over 35 for a female is a geriatric pregnancy, right? You're considered high risk past the age of 35. So women can't have children forever, right? Eventually it stops and menstruation stops and go through different phases as you age. Men can have children for as long as they want to, 16, 17 years of age. So just things to consider. I didn't have kids till like much later. I think originally I wanted kids when I was like 19. I was like, I have some kids. And then I just got more focused on like, I became a little bit more selfish, I think. Yeah, 20s and 30s. I didn't have kids till 30. And my kids are really small. They're really small, like 4 and 3. But I made sure I did everything I wanted to do. So by the time I had them, no regret. Started businesses, traveled around the world, PhD, all the time, you know. So I don't have any regrets. Bless you. And I don't know. I don't have any evidence to back it up, but my theory, what I've seen is that when children are hid by older parents, if they come out healthy, without any issues, they tend to be a little bit more wise, right? I don't know, maybe some relationship between age of parents and maybe some sense of wisdom. My mom had me at 45 years of age. So my mom's like 80, 90, almost close to 90 at this point. All right, so just some considerations. Okay, so continuing on, let's kind of just review what all we learned so far. How many stages in prenatal development? 3, right? Those stages: germinal, embryonic, fetal. You say the longest stage is what? The fetal, right? Which is say 2 weeks, really just for germination, right? Germinal phase, bunch of cells, blob of cells multiplying. The embryonic is when most of like formation of organs and things you need, heartbeat. And then that fetal is when everything just really starts to grow, mature, and attempt to stabilize on its own without the support of mom, right? It's been prepared to survive on its own. What do you think is the most critical phase from your point of view in terms of risk?
Probably neonatal, just because that's, before 3 months is when it's the most stuff we have in this country.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Embryonic, anybody else has a different argument, rationale?
You can't even travel either, cause that could risk your pregnancy. So I agree with her.
Okay. Anyone think later, because hey, you know, now that you found out you're pregnant, you're like, yo, life changes. It's gonna change for quite a bit for the next 9 months, right? Isolation, maybe some depression, maybe some stress, maybe you're gonna have a little glass of wine here and there. Maybe daddy decided he didn't want to be involved, right? Right, think about that, like as you really start to develop, like, hey, some other risks can happen, right? Maybe you're in an embryonic stage, you're like, oh, I'm pregnant, and people are like, oh, okay, well, bother me with it, right? Mom, cousins, aunties, then you find out you don't have the support, right? Or embryonic stage, you think of like, well, what am I gonna do about work? You're not gonna give me time off, I'm gonna get fired, I'm not on benefits for health, and these things, right? So a lot to consider just on the outside world, also in our mental universe, as well as our genetic universe, right? A lot to consider. Okay, so we get to fetal stage, a lot of development happening, and you know, everything mom takes in, baby gets the proper nutrients, oxygen is supplied through that placenta, through the umbilical cord. And now it's getting ready for labor, right? So labor, we say first you may have contractions. Who knows what contractions are? As you study to prepare dilation. Anyone else?
It's the release of oxytocin. Or the uterus.
You said oxytocin? All right, and oxytocin, okay, interesting. So oxytocin is, what is its function mainly as a hormone? How is it described as?
I mean, it helps with contractions.
Contraction, but say oxytocin is the love hormone, right? It's your bonding hormone. It's the hormone that is released that makes you comfortable with someone, relax, fall in love, mate, constantly think about that, right? So oxytocin is for bonding, both for mom and dad, right? Men have oxytocin, women have oxytocin. So we say contractions is when that uterine lining has these little muscle fibers that begin to kind of squeeze in so that whatever is attached to it can become released, right? Such as the placenta. You see that placenta, which is almost like a separate organ, is also attached, right? It's kind of incubated in there. All right, dilation. We say, well, dilation is when the cervix starts to open up, right? Making room for baby to come out, right? It's a big head to come out of that area. So it needs to open up. Usually dilation has kind of 2 stages. We say it's at maximum, usually it's about 10 centimeters is what we're looking for. So maybe 12 hours for it to reach about 6 centimeters. Right, well, that's a long time. Right, you're just sitting there in the bed in the hospital waiting, having contractions, waiting for dilation to happen. And then you think maybe that second phase of dilation, which leads up to about 10 centimeters, that could take maybe about 4 to 8 hours, between 4 and almost 20 hours waiting in preparation for baby. All right, then we got that amniotic sac. We see that amniotic sac is that fluid-filled sort of encapsulation around baby to protect it. And then we briefly covered last week, breech position definition. Baby is breech when it's not facing head down. The opposite, sometimes we face sideways. It's important for baby to come out head first. C-sections, we see maybe about, I think, what was it, about 30% are C-sections of births. Maybe roughly about 1/5, or 32%, so a third. A third of births are C-sections. We say cesarean section is taken, slicing open the abdomen to retrieve the baby. Those are usually We touched on the Lamaze, the doula, right, these methods of kind of having natural childbirth instead of having an epidural. No real sort of research to support that having an epidural, we have it and it's successful, that there are posing sort of challenges to the baby later on in life. And then we saw some cultural differences, right? In the United States, typically is privacy during childbirth. Usually it's just mom and dad allowed, right? And maybe after the baby is born, we allow others to come in, maybe one at a time, right? And also we're pretty strict on medical practices here, so we don't want that to be exposed to all sort of external factors. Some other communities we saw in Italy, in regions in Italy, it's a community event. People can watch the whole entire childbirth. South America and in Central America, there tends to be rituals performed over the baby, spiritual rituals, right? To make sure that certain energies or spirits are not attacking the baby. Low birth weights. Here in the US, we say low birth weight is less than how many pounds? 5.5 pounds, right? Anything less than 5. And we say that's important to know why. Why would low birth weight be an issue? What do you think? Right? You need an average birth weight in order to sustain breathing. Right? To breathe on your own, in order to sustain your liver, your kidney, right? Heart rate, blood pressure. Anything less than that, you're talking about issues in the circulatory system. So we say, hey, baby can have a stroke. Why? His blood vessels are so tight, It's so small that it's abnormally small, that it's pushing blood too hard to have a stroke. So it's not able to really support itself. So that could be an issue. We monitor that when the baby's born. Preterm, we say on average, babies show up between about 37 weeks, 42 weeks. Anything before that we would describe as preterm. Other issues for us to watch out with, cognitive development, some other genetic factors, right? We say preterm is associated with low birth weight. You don't want the baby coming out too fast. And preterm is kind of related to small for day definition. We say some contextual risks, right? Hey, where do you live? How much money do you have, right? How much money do you make? That affects potentially how well the baby's going to be developed, right? In all these stages. Hey, where do you live? What is your environment? There's a lot of stressors there, right? You're discriminated against. There are significant challenges within the home. Low birth weight is sort of attributed to a lot of these factors, right? Either people who are very poor, not able to get care or access to care. They typically have the babies preterm, right? Or have them at a low birth rate. But some of the statistics shows that either for black or white races, for females, typically it's about the same percentage of low birth rate, right? But socioeconomic status is the major factor. Poverty seems to be the attributing factor. So we say, hey, low birth weight infants have difficulty breathing. We talked about that oxygen supply, right? Severity of deficits, right? Mild, moderate, or severe, whether it's the deficits that they have in terms of heart rate, blood pressure, breathing. We need social confidence and emotional. Social confidence means that it's been linked for those who are preterm or have low birth weights that later on in life, and even in early childhood, they tend to have a lot of social, emotional issues. And you would say, well, that makes sense because if the brain is not being formed and developed in a healthy way, those synapses are not making proper connections, right? Something should be happening to have maybe a potentially smaller brain, right, for your size, for your particular body frame. You say that would be issues, right? That would lead to issues in many systems of our mind. One, our emotional center, which is our limbic system that controls our emotions. They said there's some issues there. It means that, hey, not only you weren't able to regulate your breathing on your own because you came out a preemie or preterm or low birth, not only were you having issues regulating your blood pressure on its own, not only were you able to regulate other things, you're not able to regulate hormones, right? You might have a range of hormones up and down. Like, what's wrong with that person, right? How come they can't control this? Right? They don't have any good relationships with people. They don't have a good relationship with their mother and father, who they're with all the time, right? So we see that these can contribute to a lot of social, emotional issues, right? Things that could kind of be described as spectrums of autism or something, right? Issues forming relationships, completing tasks, following rules, right? You're like, well, what all can that lead to? Well, if you don't follow rules, you know what happens usually as you become an adolescent or adult, right? A lot of criminal behavior, relationships bad, you know, not having any sort of talks with mom and dad or a good relationship with them, moving on from person to person in these intimate romantic relationships, right? There's a lot of issues linked to this. So we say, hey, this is very important. We think that, like, no, that kind of just happens on its own. That's your own choice and decision. Although it sounds wonderful, right? And we like to believe that, we say, these are automated subconscious processes. This has nothing to do with you consciously thinking, analyzing your environment or people around you. These are just subconscious acts that lead to certain results and conclusions. So we say, hey, you know what? I was premature, I was low birth weight, and now I'm at risk. Doesn't mean I'm guaranteed to have these issues, but you're at high risk. So if we think about it, like, well, where does the issues happen for people? Probably happens even before they're born, right? And you say, well, can't you change your behavior later in life? Sure, you can. But as a psychologist dealing with thousands of clients from all over the world, people rarely change. We're creatures of habit. Whatever your habit is, that's what it's going to be. May have slight modifications, usually from trauma. Right? Hey, mom died, so I guess I better get my life together and stop being knucklehead or something, right? Dog died or something, car accident. But on average, just day to day, we rarely change. So we say, hey, this is important, right? Prenatal development is extremely important for the rest of your natural life. And those emotional risks, not being able to regulate emotions. You know, we said that limbic system and the amygdala controls our emotion. And so when we are emotional, we lose activity in the prefrontal cortex. Basically means if you're emotional, you decrease in logic, right? And you make irrational decisions, right? If you're under stress all the time, creates all sorts of emotions. If you're under stress, you can't think critically. The stress is chaos to the mind. It doesn't allow the mind to relax to make good decisions. Right? I had a question for a group. So how about we break this up and do a quick group discussion? Let's see that question. Any questions so far? Fridays, what's worse, Mondays or Fridays? Is that? Oh, I gotta wear it. Yeah, I've been requested to wear my Hello Kitty shirt.
don't say so myself.
Did he tell you your drip is not full hard?
No, it's dripping pretty hard.
But then,
Okay, I think I had a question, I think so last week we talked about, well, if mom's responsible for this embryo, for this fetus, mom's behavior, I guess, should be totally accountable for her actions, right? So here's my question, first question, because I think I have a couple in your groups. Should mom be prosecuted for her drinking behavior or substance abuse behavior if the child doesn't make it through any one of these stages because of those reasons? Should mom be criminally prosecuted and go to jail? Ask, talking within your groups, let's see.
Wait, isn't that already,
yes.
that's already a law in some states?
Yeah, so I'm asking you what your opinion is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right, and think about the factors, you're like, I don't know, I mean, well, let mom just do drugs, or, right?
I think it's,
I mean, you can, but.
what I'm saying, what do you guys think? I think we have, it's already a law, some part to it. So like, either of us. We're all
She's like, no.
the mother, like having it out. Yeah, you know, we're all guys.
Here's second question to add to the first question. If you don't think she should be prosecuted, what are some alternatives that you could think of in order for her to have some sort of accountability for her actions?
Oh.
What do you think should be the punishment for it? Well, like, baby death. Based on the mother's, like, I think how it is. I think by that point, the judge is going to make but I don't know, if they the way it is right now, I think at the end of the day, you're the ones
Oh, you're saying.
I feel like
Did not know. She's like, oh, that's I don't know how this can help, but.
Okay, let's see what we came up with. Let's see how many years, Mom, should we, death penalty, what are we thinking?
We were just like jail. Okay, I'm not here today.
All right, group one. What were your thoughts?
He said, yeah, she should be prosecuted because, because the effects of her, like, drinking and doing drugs could, like, impact the baby's life for the rest of his life. So, that's another point where if she, like, chose it, then that's, like, a whole life that could have been saved if you would just have gotten help.
Okay, so you say, hey, you know what, you made a choice, you made a decision, irregardless of your situation, whatever you're going through, whatever the factors out there, you're still responsible, it should be done. Okay, what would you think would be like an adequate?
Like, well, obviously, I don't know, maybe not like go to jail or anything, but like have some sort of like consequence that would maybe
Okay.
have her not do that.
Can you think of any consequences, like alternatively? Okay, give me a minute to think about it. Group two, what do you think? So we say one for criminal
So
prosecution.
we thought that they should get prosecuted because, if you're pregnant and you decide that you wanna have a baby, I feel like you're choosing to take responsibility to bring this baby, to life, healthy, you know? If, at least like from what you can do,
So therefore, we may, from your point of view, are you viewing it as currently a life form, or just the potentiality of it being successfully being a life form?
what do you mean?
Like if you're saying criminally prosecuted, like what are you being criminally prosecuted for exactly?
Oh.
Like you like the potential of a life form inside of you to be born and have a great life as you have, Mom?
Yeah,
Or you're like, no, it actually is a life form.
the potential.
The potential.
If you're forming it, maybe I feel like if you choose that you want to be a mom, then it's not like, I mean, I know it's not legal in every state and whatever, but, if you don't want a baby, then I guess there are options for that.
irregardless, once again, of situation. Okay. What was adequate prosecution? What do you think?
So one of our options were like either, well, jail, but not death penalty. I just don't think that would be fair. But maybe less than a year, like 9 months of jail or something. I don't know. Yeah.
9 months.
I
Interesting,
don't
right?
know, I don't know.
9 months in jail. That's an interesting argument. What about here?
Oh, would be the prosecuted.
Alright, so prosecute it again.
It'd be different if she was purposely doing drugs and alcohol. Like, she was saying how maybe she didn't know she was pregnant. Some people can't even show until like later on. You know, this reminds me actually of a case. There was this cheerleader who was pregnant. She didn't show at all and gave birth to the kid and ended up burying it and she went to jail. Yeah. I
See,
don't know if
like-
you guys ever heard of that.
Hey, what if you don't know that you're pregnant
Yeah,
until
like you
2
start
months
being-
later, but
that's
you
what
already
I'm
been a
saying.
raging alcoholic for 2 months?
Yeah.
But now you stop. You're like, hey, too late. I think you caused some damage. Alright, slippery slope.
So jail.
So you're still saying
Oh,
give
yeah,
her,
yeah, yeah.
even though she didn't know till later on?
That'd be different, but
Cause I'm not
Okay.
to think about it in jail.
that's damn right.
How long? What, or?
I think we were like, what were you saying, we were like 3 to 5 years?
Whoa.
It's a kid.
That might prevent people from like,
What is
scare people from like even
You
attempting
gotta
that.
scare 'em. It's jail, what, I mean,
There'd be a lot of people going to jail after. Here's a question, just for the whole class to think about. You're like, well, is it all online? Like somebody, that's half of that DNA is from some guy that's just out there hanging out, right? Mom and face going to jail.
She decided to sleep with him. I'm
yeah, but like,
sorry.
where's baby daddy? Like,
She knew he wasn't gonna be
right,
around.
if she knew that he wasn't gonna be there, then, girl,
Remember, we got psychopaths, sociopaths, Machiavellian types, people who deceive people very quickly.
guys, please don't get pregnant with a psychopath, I beg of y'all. Please do not get pregnant with a psycho.
If you want a short watch about that, watch Dexter. Oh my god, I lost Dexter.
Okay, next group, what are you thinking?
So, we criminally prosecuted, but we were talking about like if abortion is illegal in that state, so like Missouri is illegal to have an abortion. So if you're drinking just to get rid of the kid, then like I could see why you're doing that type of deal, and you should still be prosecuted though.
Okay. You're like,
But
hey,
you can see the reasoning behind drinking, cause you can't just like, sometimes you can't just cross over to another state to get an abortion. So they gotta get rid of them somehow.
you're like, yeah, because that's slippery slope too. You're like, hey, what if your method of getting an abortion is just drinking on purpose?
Yeah.
Right? And you don't wanna actually go to the clinic and do something like that. Okay. I don't want this baby to survive on purpose. Yes?
You bring a good point about like the sociopaths and stuff like that, because if the woman is raped, method of coping for her might be the drugs and the alcohol.
Right? A lot to think about.
But I still think even then, she should be,
Responsible
Yeah.
after the fact. Good arguments, I don't know.
I don't
Listen.
think she deserves jail time, but maybe like a psyche eval or something like that.
Like a program.
Yeah.
Alright, so we say, alright, that's a good alternative, right? Say psyche eval. Alright, figure out what happened, right? And then maybe criminally prosecute. Someone else again? Okay, group back there?
We went with criminal persecution, it's like the other group,
Wow.
that, a basically the parents if you guys decide on your course of action and that you're going to bring a baby, turn it to obligation, your responsibility. 'Cause,
You guys,
yeah, so,
mom and dad?
yeah, so we said a bit of both, but, I mean, I can't personally drink and have the effects from a baby unless it's physically, so.
What if there's an absent father?
Yeah, so,
What if the father's not known? What was multiple partners? 5 partners around the same time?
maybe.
I don't know about that, but that's not my video.
That's not a
Yeah, I don't even have 5 friends, like, what?
It happens, go look up all the court, shows or whatever.
I'm sorry, 5, 6, 5.
Right, so I mean, but you're saying regardless of all that,
Yeah.
mom, you have a responsibility of bringing this child to term.
Yeah.
And you gotta face the consequences. Okay, what do you recommend?
Probably like 9 months to a year and a half.
What was, how many?
9 months to a
9
year and a
months,
half.
okay. Okay. Interesting.
You just need it, though.
And the reason being,
Once you're pregnant, you have a responsibility.
regardless of any other situation of that. So no matter what, any alternatives that you could think of? Or it's like, no, mom needs jail time, severe
I
punishment?
always jail on nobody, I ain't even want to do jail. I probably would do like a second, but I would just, I would just go home and come out of jail.
Okay. Let's see, 2 seconds. Alright. Did all of you agree with that?
No, she got a whole.
I sense that there may be a difference of. Ooh,
Oh,
yeah.
I said if she doesn't know, and she's drinking, she's going to big change, she can go to rehab and focus on like therapy, talking to someone else.
Okay.
If she did not.
How could you
I don't
determine?
believe that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone. So they're like telling me.
Maybe
what
it's
to
the
say.
psyche valve, right? Maybe the psyche valve and the psychologist determines like
Yeah.
some deception here, or, you know, maybe it's true. Okay.
Lie detector.
Lie detectors can't be proved, and
Yeah.
lie detectors don't work for what kind of people?
Psychopaths.
And sociopaths. Right? They do not respond in the normal way as you would respond if you were telling a lie.
I mean, they're able to manipulate, so they can really just tell you whatever you want to hear.
Well, they don't identify with the concept of truth. You get what I'm saying? Their truth is their own truth. So if you actually know that something's a lie, not a fact, you're gonna have a response to it, right? But these people don't, right? They're master this concept of mine. Becca,
So, we've been like for 2 different ones. So, if the mother is like heavily addicted to any type of drug throughout the pregnancy, sometimes she can have, it's kind of malicious because especially if she knew she was pregnant and she was doing this, what if like the baby survived and she still was heavily into drugs? She would already be an unfit parent anyway, and somewhere along the line, CPS is gonna arrest her because she's already an unfit parent, and she could still go to jail for that. So either or, just her being a parent alone and being into drugs, that could still lead to criminal prosecution. So I think it's fair if the baby still came out and it didn't make it, still be criminal prosecuted. And I know in some prisons, like jails and stuff, there's like site where they can help the inmate get like some type of help to stop addiction. So I feel even if like they didn't get criminally prosecuted, I feel like it's only fair if they still did because they would still get help either way.
a jail may create an intervention of some sort, right? Hey, what if somebody was addicted, like you were saying, addicted beforehand, but they don't go get help? You don't just turn off addiction. You don't just wake up and go, oh my gosh, I'm responsible and accountable because I'm pregnant. But I was already a crackhead, right? Or addicted to heroin, I've been you don't, go get the help. You're like, well, maybe that's still need criminal prosecution, right? It's tough, bad for you. You're gonna say,
Yeah, I also agree with her, and kind of disagree, because what if, like, say, beforehand, she never, never did drugs, never did anything, but she was raped and sexually assaulted,
Mhm.
then that mindset would shift into like trauma, and now she started doing all this stuff. Should she still be prosecuted
mhm.
because of that, because that mentality had changed on her?
Yeah.
And now she wants to like, abort, or like doesn't, or don't want to, it depends on the case, and it depends on like her mentality.
All right, so they say, hey, it can't be all the way through, it's a case-by-case basis, right? There's some extreme, abnormal, unusual, unreasonable situations that can impact that. All right, good, there's something to think about. Let's wrap this up. So we say, interventions, right? We get things like kangaroo care, what we call skin-to-skin contact. People familiar with that? Skin-to-skin. What does that do? Skin-to-skin. Baby born, immediately cradle it, put on your chest. Mom and dad, both mom and dad.
And that creates a bond between the baby and the parent.
Yeah, oxytocin again, right? You say, hey, you're bonding, and for that baby, that bonding soothes them, it regulates the heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, and it creates an actual hormonal bond between two people, as if you were in love, right? It's the same mechanism, sexually, romantically, parentally, anything of the sort. And then we got two scales, APGAR scale. This one measures what color is the baby when it's born, right? How's its breathing, things like that, right? Sort of very physical characteristics. And then the Brazilian Neonatal Behavioral Assessment Scale. This one measures by reflexes. They shine a light on the baby. Is there a response to it? What about its hearing? Does it respond to sound, right? Kind of looking at sensation and perception. And when our babies can hear about 22 weeks, right, in the womb. So babies can hear even before they're born. When they're born, they have a high degree of perception for taste and smell. They react, they'll regurgitate something that's, bad or spoiled. And last, we have our sleep cycle. Sleep is important for all of us, but even more so important for babies. 4 sleep cycles. The last one's called REM sleep. REM stands for rapid eye movement. Usually we have what we call sleep paralysis. The body is literally separated from the brain in some sort of way, right? Brain is still functioning, heart rate slows, breathing slows, but you can't move your body, right? You can't actively move your body in REM sleep. So that's your last deep sleep. But babies sleep around 18 hours a day, almost like cats, right? They take mostly naps, and they're very sensitive. That's why it's like, when you come in the house and there's a baby, like, shh. I'm like, come on, it's not a big deal. Like, yeah, it is a big deal. They're very sensitive, because if they don't get this proper sleep, we say those neurons don't connect properly, right? Even though 100 billion neurons, 100 trillion connections in the human brain. Google it. But we say, hey, it's still important. Brain still has to develop. Baby can't be shocked during sleep. They face all sort of issues later on in life. And that's that. Okay, well, catch up on chapter 4.